Let's get things in order here. Welcome to another edition of Together We Write. My name is Chris Brzezinski, Assistant Professor of English and Humanities here at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. Trying to get things all organized here a little bit. There we go. So today we're going to take a break from things. If you're watching this for the purposes, if you're participating in one of my classes, this is taking a slight detour from our curriculum this week. We're looking at AI-assisted writing, and this is, if you probably know, has been a hot topic since late last year. I remember finishing off my semester going over some of these new tools that had been released, namely ChatGPT was the big one, and sitting in front of a arts entrepreneurship course that I was teaching, and every student enrolled in that class is a some form of creative writer, and sort of demoing this on the fly, not really knowing myself what would happen, and just having it say, write a poem. And amazing what it produced. Only, yeah, there was a lot of flaws. Students in the class were mortified, not because they were worried about their own livelihoods in any. There was really no threat to the creative writing process, to put it mildly. It's terrible poetry, terrible prose. Even, when I had experimented with it, I had asked it to write an essay, asked it to talk about themes of sibling rivalry in, I think, Catcher in the Rye. I mean, a book I haven't read in ages, so I have no idea if there are any themes like that. But for regardless of my lack of knowledge, it produced a pretty good looking essay. Five paragraphs. I think that's what I asked it. Really well written. If I, not remembering anything about Catcher in the Rye, certainly not knowing if there were any themes of sibling rivalry in the work, I found it to be fairly persuasive, as far as, and I'm again not really scrutinizing it, but wow, this is, if I didn't know any better, this would be a pretty darn good essay. And when I started thinking about my role as an instructor, as a writing instructor, and I don't often teach courses where we write essays about literature anymore. I don't. Not that I don't want to, but it just hasn't come my way in a while. And I think about when I was teaching a lot of classes, and if I had, say, 25 students per class, 5 courses in a semester, 125 essays on a topic, I wouldn't have time to be critical of anyone's writing. And so it really made me think that this, despite, when I had time and I had intention, I could easily pick out what was created by this new tool, ChatGPT. However, I just can't imagine anyone with dozens, if not hundreds, of similar essays to review and give feedback on. I just can't imagine how it'd be possible. And so my take on this has become not so much a throwing my hands up in the air and giving up, but recognizing this as a valid skill set that, while it may not be up to snuff yet, in the very near future, it's going to be pretty powerful. And I'll talk about that in either the session today or I'm going to do another one tomorrow. So, anyway, just to uh, kind of jump into things, tomorrow I'm giving a presentation or a workshop tomorrow for um, members of our local governments through the Clerks and Treasurers Institute, and it's going to be on AI assisted writing for governments. And I'm kind of using this time as a way of practicing, rehearsing that, and going through the slides. So there may be some things that are relevant. There may be some things that seem a little bit off in the distance, but I'm going to try to keep this fairly focused on what we how we're going to use it. I'm speaking going to be speaking in general terms because um, for what it's there's just way too many more questions than there are answers right now. Even as I'm adding information about how to cite this, you know, I remember like putting something together late last semester, mid spring semester, and the information about how to cite these tools had changed between drafts. So we're talking about a matter of days. And so it's really important to keep in mind that a lot of the information that I'm offering is, um, I try to keep it up to date, but it may not be. If you are watching this as a student, be very, very careful. There's a lot of things to be cautious when using these tools, despite all of the investment, despite um, the widespread popularity and growing popularity, and despite the fact that it does alleviate a lot of those pains that come with writing. Just be very careful. Don't ever trust, and I'll go into this later on, but you know, as an instructor, I am okay with students using these tools. And there are a number of reasons for that. Reason one being this is a skill set that's going to be in demand. If it's anything like um, the web, if it's anything like spell check, there are all sorts of analogies that are being used. I often think back to when I was going through school for graphic design, illustration, visual arts, and the web was coming up. I had I was very fortunate to grow up with a computer that had internet access with the whole like screeching modem and everything. And so I knew that this was going to be a thing. It had been for almost 5, 6, 7 years up at that point. So I jumped on web design and started to learn certain, the Adobe Suite. I had gotten my hands on those, and so at the time was my first job was in the printing industry, and they were already freaking out about digital technology and network technology and how are we going to work with this, and there were all sorts of issues. But I saw the impact that it had on an industry, and print is obviously still around. The internet certainly did some sort of had an impact, but things sorted themselves out. Yes, there were people that lost their jobs. There were people that I worked or at least in proximity to, that didn't want to learn anything new, and that's cool, and they were found other positions, and it's so the same thing will happen here. I think what's going to be interesting is seeing how it shakes out, what facets of our professional lives will change because of this, and it will change. Okay, because regardless of my belief is, regardless of how we feel about this, um, it's going to happen. I think this is something that, to put it bluntly, if there's something that's going to save people money, it's going to get used. If there's something that for whatever reason makes money or saves money, it's going to end up being widely adopted. So what does what does this tool do? It saves us time. It saves us money. Rather than having, when I was a content writer for an advertising agency, a lot of the work that I would spend my days doing, getting paid pretty decent money to crank out short articles about tourism in various locations around the United States. Weeks of work could be accomplished in a matter of probably minutes, maybe days if I wanted to do a really good job. But we're talking about maybe a day's worth of work, tops. And that's pretty significant. And again, regardless of how we feel about this, I as an instructor, I think it's the ethical. There are a lot of ethical questions surrounding this, without a doubt. But as far as my teaching stance goes, I feel like it's my duty, part of my job, to train students with the tools that are going to be that they're going to be required to use. Um, you know, uh, no supervisor, if someone were, I believe by the time that most of the people are in my classes at this point, by the time they graduate, it will be a required skill. It's just being adopted way too fast. Um, and I don't think most employers can keep up with it. I don't believe most students, certainly most educators, although I'm very impressed with, for what it's worth. I mean, far be it from me to be, saying something like this, but I'm very impressed with how UWGB has addressed this. I mean, we were able to put something together pretty fast and have a good, solid discussion with other writing instructors. Our cattle folks were quick to do their own thing. The School of Business has done their own thing. There's a lot of people doing their own approaching this, but we're all thankfully, we're all coming at it from the same perspective. This is something that we cannot um, police. It would be too difficult. I don't know about other. I mean, coming from English and humanities, we have a very different approach. We have from, say, the sciences and engineering. I'm not exactly up to date with how they are managing. All I can say, and this is the last thing I'll mention before moving on, because going on 15 minutes here. Um, there is not going to be a single profession that is not impacted by this in some way. We're already seeing this. If we're paying attention to the strikes out in Hollywood, writers, actors. Um, Prior to that, creative artists, visual artists, photographers, computer programmers, uh, which shocks me, are being impacted by this. There's a lot of uncertainty there. I would be willing to bet that anything involving technical, uh, very structured, very consistent, anything that can be simulated is going to be impacted heavily. Um, I don't know about engineers. I would be shocked if engineering wasn't affected by this, because that is something that I would think could be handled. But the interesting thing there, the sector that is going to be expected to be impacted most are middle management. Uh, the world of business is going to be, I think, severely impacted. I think I just read the other day that one of these tools was messing around, did some, stock market predictions, and it I don't know. I know nothing about this stuff, but it was like 500% profit or something like that. So it's pretty significant. So anyway, I think it's something that even if you never use these tools, be aware that it is going to have an impact on the professions in the very near future, if it isn't already. Okay, so if you never touch these, if you don't think they're worth it, that's your right. But just be aware that it is going to have an impact. Okay, I encourage anyone watching this to get familiar with them. You don't have to be a prompt engineer, but at least know that what's happening, and recognize and be critical of the writing that's happening out there anymore, because it is, you start to see these familiar phrasings, the wording. As one student said, it's very dry, um, and so after a while you start to recognize it. So be aware. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through these little slide. I'm going to go through this, and again, this is sort of a rehearsal for a series of workshops I'm giving tomorrow, and I'm going to go through a little bit of a demonstration along the way. So I'm going to be bouncing around here between some screens. All right, let's see if I can. Where are we? Nope, nope, nope. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. All right, so let's go ahead and just play this. I'll reduce my. Thank you for your patience as I'm going through this stuff. All right, so AI assisted writing. Today we're focusing really on. There's a lot of different functions for, and I'm going to go through three major tools today. One has changed since I put these slides together, so I might be fuddling around with that a little bit. But AI assisted writing is what we're focusing on today, and that is going to be. Okay, we've got a few topics to cover. I want to go over a broad overview and a little bit of a background of ChatGPT, because this is the tool that OpenAI put out there into the world back in November, and since then everyone has sort of followed suit. It is, to put it mildly, it has made a seismic shift in the way things function anymore. And so we'll look at the way how this GPT technology has been implemented into a couple other big players' primary tools, namely Google and Microsoft. All right, we'll also mention a few of the other tools that are out there. At the time when I wrote this, when I put these slides together, there were all sorts of more independently run tools that were being put out there. I don't even know if they exist anymore. It was again, it reminded me of the early internet when everyone was putting a website out there. I should say the early days of the popular web. All right, then we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of some of these tools and how they're going to play out and some of the ripple effects. And then we're going to go over a little bit of a demonstration. Basic prompt engineering, even though that phrase prompt engineering is starting to become a little bit more scrutinized. Anyway, so let's start with some of the functions and limitations of this. All right. So basically what these tools do is they generate language. And this is, if you think about it, these are sort of following a tradition of language tools that have been with us for a while. Microsoft Word implemented spell check in 2005, although it had been around for a little while. We have Grammarly now that helps make suggestions about grammar, spelling, or and it's just a little add-on. Okay, so even our emails If I am typing out an email to someone, in fact, was doing so this morning, and it asked me, I could just swipe my finger across my phone and it would finish the sentence I was trying to make for me, right? So the way these tools work is it just creates content based on training material, and I'll go over that in a second. The responses are, even though they start to sound a little familiar if you spend any amount of time with them, all the responses are fairly unique, and I'll explain how that works in a moment. One other thing to keep in mind is that there is no connection to your personal data. So if I'm using Google Bard or Microsoft Copilot, which is not out yet, but it will be out soon, these are not using my personal information. Okay, it is pulling from the large, expansive body of information that is out there in the internet. I believe OpenAI took online data up till September of 2021, I believe. So I could be wrong, but I'm assuming that all of the information that anyone has, that we have as a uh, internet any all of us who have internet access have been contributing to this body of information. Okay, it's that's just how from texts, articles, anything that gives that think about how it's training. I'll go over this in a second. I need to take a step back. So, oops. It is good for information retrieval. So ChatGPT is really good if, I think what I asked it the other day, something about I was cooking something and I asked it real quick. Now, interestingly, this also comes at a time when, where Google search is largely being replaced, at least in my mind, because I'm not getting inundated by ads every time I do a search. And I know that my search is in a contained environment and not being used to sell me products. So if I do, if you've ever had that experience where you uh, ask Google, hey, show me a recipe for this, and you see ingredients showing up in your search a couple days later, advertisements for similar products showing up. This is why this happens. It's kind of nice that if I plug in a similar question into ChatGPT, I don't get I don't get bombarded by those ads. One fascinating function of these two, at least ChatGPT, is translation. So I could translate language from one language to another without being able to check for accuracy. That's a pretty profound function. We do have Google Translate, but I always get mixed results with that. I don't trust it. I don't particularly trust ChatGPT either, but it seems to be, for many accounts, it does seem to be spot on. Does a great job with text summarization. So if you are one activity we do in class, for example, is have you could take a piece of information, copy and paste a piece of information into the ChatGPT prompt, and it will summarize it for you, create bullet points. Now, when we start talking about Microsoft, for example, this is fantastic. If I can take a 20-page paper and create a bulleted outline from that, you're talking about saving me hours of time. That's pretty significant. Okay. Also with conversational assistants. Now this was kind of a cool thing that an international student mentioned back in late fall semester. Said he likes a lot of these tools because it helps him with learning English. Okay, so learning how to, um, if you can create an environment in these tools that say like helps develop your mastery of any language, I guess, but it does seem to favor English. All right, so some of the limitations. There's really there. Um, it's very good at retrieving information. Up until September 2021 is the cutoff date. So there really is no knowledge of current events. There's no, but even more importantly, it lacks any sort of empathy, compassion. It really has a hard time with any sort of contextual information. So it's a very isolated tool. So there are methods of, like, it can read sentiment through the types of terms being used, for example, but it's very, this is sort of a robotic motion. It's just sort of saying like, well, if you use the word um, upset, you know, it, any reasonable person or machine for that matter would be able to reasonably say, well, you're either sad or you're angry. So keep in mind that this is also the training data that it's used is uh, millions, if not billions, of texts. I have to look up the numbers again. It's an fathomable number. The Think of all the articles and that are out there. It's taking these all and basically creating a data set to help create and anticipate language structures. Okay, so we'll talk about how this happens shortly. Errors and biases. Research. There. I can't remember the exact term. Hallucination, I think it was. There was, if a fun demonstration, for example, is to say, hey, write a biography for yourself. And the information it comes up with is garbage. It's eerily similar. So for me, it picked up, okay, that I graduated from college, wrong college. I'm living in the wrong area, but it picked up on all these other little things like hobbies and other pieces of information. So it's like this sort of ghost of a biography. I don't know how to explain it. And no visual content yet on ChatGPT, but I'm sure that's going to change because there are certainly others. So you can't have it produce pictures, although other tools certainly can. Um, you know, OpenAI also released DAL-E, which is one of the first text to image creators, and that was, if you've ever seen like Stable Diffusion or DALL-E, I can't remember, there's another big one out there. um, we're starting to see, I think Google does it. I believe in Microsoft you can upload images and get information from that. More importantly, Google, or not Google, Adobe, if you're not familiar, they are the kind of the big design software suite. Photoshop, Illustrator, that's Adobe. Now Adobe is getting into the game soon with their Firefly, and that is going to help produce text to image. So you can type in a prompt, say, hey, I want a frog sitting on a lily pad, and it'll wearing a top hat, and it will create that. Now, Adobe has gotten ahead of the game in some ways by saying, hey, we're only using our existing stock photos. However, this is similar to, and I don't want to get into um, current events so much, but this is comparable to the issues that the actors and actresses are having out in Hollywood. We have, what did I just read today? That the actor who played some character in the Power Rangers, whatever the floating head guy was, I never watched it. My kids did though, and I think he was paid $150, and all they did was do like a screen capture, some footage, one sitting, and that was it. And for all of those episodes, and still being released, he was only paid $157. Well, very similar, minor, small part actors and actresses getting paid pennies for their streaming services, and now they're talking about, they want people to sign up to have to be scanned so they can be turned into extras uh, through digital technology. Now, this has been a long time coming. Kind of see this. This is not surprising. Um, anyway, but yeah. So all that's to say is lack of visual content with ChatGPT, and in a lot of ways. And I got to say this. I should say this now. A lot of ways, ChatGPT is falling behind the other major players. Now, OpenAI created ChatGPT. Okay, let's see. Good. Yeah. So OpenAI created ChatGPT, fed it, like I said, billions of documents, and it created what we call a large language model, LLM. Right. So what this is it takes the all this information, and it says, now think, may help to know a little bit about artificial intelligence. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but just think about, um, to keep it simple, think of artificial intelligence as just being able to recognize and utilize patterns. Now, every, most humans, most all humans, and even some animals can get, they understand patterns. Okay, humans are particularly good at recognizing patterns, and and this is why your email, when you're starting to write an email out, it can predict what you're going to say because we have very predictable patterns. Especially with language, certain types of writing. This is, you can start to see why creative writers kind of balk at this, because they have a mastery of language that is much more nuanced, and not part of the part of that business is foiling those patterns, foiling expectations. So, this is why I would argue creative practitioners, by and large, are going to be, that's going to shake out. I don't want to make any bold claims, but I think they're going to be, uh, it's going to be a prized skill set. Maybe I'm being a little bit optimistic. Anyway, so ChatGPT, you got this huge body of language. So based on the billions of texts that have been uploaded into this training model, they can now, they have this interface, ChatGPT, that can, you can interact with in a much more conversational way. Okay. So GPT, simply put, is what a generative pre-trained transformer. That's what the GPT stands for. So generative refers to how text is created. It is created after the prompt, right? So you can actually watch it sort of writing out. It'll probably be a while before I forget those first responses when I type something in class or for a workshop and put a prompt in and it just starts scrolling down. Pretty remarkable. Pre-trained, that's talking about the billions of text files. So again, most of these tools use a corpus of information. They feed into it, and that's what's used to create this model. Okay, now, to go back to a point earlier from like why ChatGPT might be falling behind fairly soon, think of all the information that Google, who has been the dominant search engine for decades, think of all the information they have. I can't remember the comparison, but I think it dwarfs what OpenAI currently has. All right, so all that text, all that is used to train the model. Now, in the future, very near future, what organizations will be likely to do is train their own version of this. So you could have a proprietary version. Um, Individuals could have it, right? If I uploaded every piece of writing that I've written, I would be willing to bet that a personal GPT could create more writing. That's awful lot like mine, right? So transformer, and this is a little bit more technical, and I'm going to struggle with this one. So a transformer is essentially that language learning model that works to anticipate what the prompt is getting at. So let's think about it this way. If I say, I gotta think of a better prompt. If I ask it to write an acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize, these tools will go through, and based on the prompt, it will respond in a way that is making approximations along the way. Okay, what is this? How across all the Nobel acceptance prizes speeches that have ever been made, how are they structured? What is the language that's used? And it's going to create an acceptance speech based on thousands of acceptance speeches that have ever been written, and use that to say, okay, based on what the prompt is asking of me, the AI, I'm going to guess that the first word would be thank, the next word will be you, the third word will be for. And so it just goes through and does its best guess. This is why each response is going to be slightly different, because based on your prompt, it might look skew one way or the other. So it's all based on probability. Okay, what is the likelihood that this is the best term to use? So, and what they've done is OpenAI created this model, this algorithm, and placed it into an online interface known ChatGPT. And so what we have is this conversational human-computer interaction that we've had, that had, even as powerful as Google is, it's not conversational. As I'll show you in a second, ChatGPT is much more conversational, and you can even change the mannerisms and tone of how it responds depending on what you're looking for. So it's pretty powerful in that way as well. So Google Bard, Microsoft Bing have come out with their own versions of this. They've taken that GPT technology and plopped it into their own tools. So Google has Google Bard. I can show you some of those in a moment. Microsoft Bing, which we use here on campus, it's already added to the Microsoft Edge browser, and soon they will be rolling out Copilot, which looks even more powerful. And I'll mention that in a second. There's also a variety of dedicated writing tools. Jasper and Notion are a couple that come to mind. My email inbox is, I think every day there's another tool that's coming out or something that's out there. They're pretty expensive for what, $30 a month. But again, that's what I mean when I said earlier, it's kind of the Wild West. Is that what's exactly what they're what's happening out there is once people have gotten with a little bit of knowledge, You can create a tool that is, say used to, let's write blog posts. Let's write like going to write social media posts, and it's does a pretty good job. Notion's been around for a while, and they added something similar where it may just be a prompt like, "What are you trying to write?" or uh, "What can I help you with?" And it's almost like a more advanced assistant in that way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and slide this over. So let's look at this a little bit. I want to show some of the features here. All right, so this is the interface. Now, make myself really small. All right, so this is the sidebar. What I have, where am I at? This area that I'm occupied in here is the sidebar. Okay, it's a very simple interface. I'm signed in with my Google account here, so it's connected to that. Again, my Google information is not being used to create these answers. So the entities are very separate. I'm just using this to sign in. All right, and so real simple. I got this new chat button here. I've got this. I can close the sidebar. There's some personal information here. I can ask help, settings. There's some information here that I don't really mess around with too much. You can clear all the information. Here is, this is new. I haven't seen this before. A code interpreter. Again, programmers. Let's see, data controls. So I can export my data, and I've done this. And so what it ends up producing is at least in some of the files, there's like a text file that told me exactly what my prompts were. I'm going to have to do this again and open that up, see what's in there. But shared links. Okay, chat history and training. So that's on. But anyway, so we've got the sidebar here. Oops. There we go. All right, so it does preserve all of your chats. So if I start a new one, so notice that once it responds, and then it adds a new chat, and I can also add a new one. Let's see. All right, so I've got two. Notice I asked the same question. I said the same thing. There are two. The response is the same. The labels are different. Okay, so I can edit. I can change the name there. I can share the link to chat. So I could probably send it somewhere. Messages you send after creating your link won't be shared. Anyone with the URL will be able to view this shared chat. So it's a way of sharing it. And then there's this, you can delete it. So I can get rid of this one, delete it. Yes, go ahead. All right. So here we have ChatGPT. And it does, again, store your data. All right. So be aware of that. This is also why you're never supposed to use anything private or personal. Never input that into these tools ever. All right. Because then it is used for, so like no military secrets or anything like that. All right. This is the text input bar here. And so let's say, please give me for so please give me a recipe for black and white cookies, and it cranks out something pretty comprehensive. That's pretty straightforward. I wouldn't be too worried about if this is legitimate. It looks pretty solid. Let's see. Um, want it to summarize it, there you go. So I've summarized that recipe. It probably wouldn't be very good. This is the free version. So notice here, this is, you can copy this, but you can also say whether it's a good response or a bad response. Now, this is how you train it, okay? This is one of those functions I don't think, myself included, I don't think we take into account, like this is how we train it. So if I like this recipe, it'll ask me for some feedback. I know I got time for that. This is harmful, this isn't true, this isn't helpful. And it's going to use that information, and so it could adjust accordingly, but this is how it's trained, okay? I think if I remember right, it's worth noting that when you sign in, log into your account, it does remind you that this is basically an experiment that's still being worked on. So it is being used for research purposes. And so it's worth keeping that in mind. This has the two versions there as well, which is kind of cool. So I could regenerate the response if I wanted to, but that's pretty much it. Let's try another one. I'm going to do the new chat. This time I'm going to use GPT-4, which is a slightly more advanced model. I don't remember the differences, but it's supposed to be, there is a cap of 25 messages every 3 hours. Now, if I say, oops, let's try this again. Actually, let's try a new one. Create an outline for a if I were to create an outline, and then it will create an outline complete with formatting and everything, which is pretty nice. Again, fairly straightforward. It's a little bit slower. I don't remember the exact details about it, but there are supposed to be faster response times, and you get a little bit of customer support, though I can't imagine how good that is. So this is fairly comprehensive, and again, it's taking all the information about ChatGPT and saying, okay, how do I boil this down into an outline? So that's what it's doing. All right. So that's pretty straightforward. All right. And let's try. Now, this one is, I don't know how experimental it is anymore. I know you had to sign up for it, but it's probably released. Again, it says experiment. Enter a prompt here. Let's see what they say. It feels like a little bit slower, but again, it gives you these functions, same thing, good response, bad response. You can modify it, you can share and export it, or you can do a Google, right? And so that's one nice feature of the Google version, is that you can do a little bit of searching while you're at it. So that's pretty convenient. Bard uses almost the entire, like I said before, it almost uses the entire world of knowledge that Google gives you access to. That's its training model, which is pretty significant. The information is up to date. What? All right, so July 18th, 2023, we've got some nice bulleted list of news stories. All right, so here is another thing I want to, let's see, actually, one of the other things that will go, I will show real quick. So recently I signed up for some of their beta tests, and this is, I can't remember the name of it, but this is how they're implementing these functions into their tools. So this is something that we really want to be watching because most all of our tools are going to have these functions. I think we need to be aware of this. So help me write. Oops. Oh, is it going to do it? Huh. Okay, let's try this again. And so this will do its thing. Oh, so that's yeah, again, experimental. Now I'm wondering if this will also help with other things. So if I go to at, I think it's because I'm under another account. Maybe Sheets will do something. So yeah, so Workspace Labs, it gives you, this is the information. So I haven't played around with this yet, but so you can see, anyway, all this is to say that Google is moving fast, implementing these tools into across its platform. So this is worth considering if you are part of if you're involved in the Google ecosystem. This is probably going to be a function that's going to be rolled out. If you are an organization that uses Google tools, be aware of this because this could be something that has a hopefully not too much, but again, privacy issues. This information is being used to train this data, so you probably wouldn't want any in-house secrets, right? All right, let's go to Microsoft Bing. This is one that here on campus we are a Microsoft campus, so this is what we use. I'm gonna have to reach that out. I can't stand this dashboard here. I'm gonna have to change that. Let's see. Go to my LinkedIn feed. There you go. So anyway, here we have in the upper right hand corner is this little thing here. And this is the Microsoft's version of the GPT technology. So it asks you what kind of conversation do you want? Balanced, precise, creative. For my purposes, would usually check precise. Welcome back. What would you like to chat about? And then it asks you a bunch of, it's almost like a search. Okay, so this is a bit more conversational. Now seems pretty benign, but under compose, we have more, cover letter for a marketing position. You can adjust the tone. It's interesting. Not exactly sure what that means, but casual. So you can do paragraph, email, blog post, idea, do a list of ideas, short, medium, long. Let's say, So if I wanted to do a marketing campaign for water bottles and it's gonna start cranking stuff out, hey, are you thirsty? Do you want to stay hydrated and healthy? Right? So here we have this sort of marketing strategy, engaging the audience, posing questions. Yeah, I am thirsty. Yeah, I am kind of done talking. All right, so you can change the tone, rewrite it for coffee mugs instead. That's funny. All right, and then you can add to the site. This is to, oh, I can't remember exactly what this does, but I think if you're doing like a blog post, it will add it to the site. It will add it to your um, whatever you're writing. I have to check that though. All right, then insights is if you're whatever. I wonder. Yep. So because I have a text input box, it can add that right there into the box. So now think if you were to do, if you were the social media manager for a company, think of how much time this would save. Now, I'm not saying that this is a good thing necessarily. I'm trying to be as objective as possible. Honestly, I've had jobs that would be completely eliminated with these tools. I mean, I would not have a web content creator. I'm not sure for the company that I worked for at the time, they would have been all over this. Okay. For other companies that, say like, and I'm sure there are publications, I can't remember the names of them, but there are some major ones that are utilizing this technology for sure. But most reputable sources would probably not rely on this. Okay. Um, it's good for starters, but I would wholeheartedly avoid using any of these tools for just creating stuff and running with it without certainly without checking. But all right, so those are the three big players. Let me go back to this. And so we have this thing called prompt engineering now. This has kind of come about as a um, almost a job description. Prompt engineer. I've got the little one down here in the bottom. Um, 93 to $212,000 a year, according to this experience with engineering testing and evaluating the performance of AI prompts. Now, um, it's often I saw something on Reddit the other day that someone was getting frustrated with the term prompt engineering because it's almost an insult to engineers. And the way it's like, well, you're just putting in a prompt. Well, there is a little bit more to it than that. Maybe not a significant amount more, but it does help to have a little bit of training in computer science. Most of it's over my head. In another session that I won't do for classes, uh, we would cover that. All right, so really what this is, prompt engineering is simply being able to tweak and nurture the tools to create the desired response. And I think also keeping a sustained response, like training it to do certain things the way you want it. It takes a little bit of time, and knowing how language works, knowing and to some degree knowing how the technology works can help. Um, but the other thing too, and what's like I mentioned before, what's coming down the pipeline is the ability for organizations and individuals to create their own. So really what it comes down to is once you have this ability, how do you train it? Okay, so training is sort of the next step. Okay. Uh, Still, it's an in-demand skill set. It's probably something that's going to become even more so as time goes on. I think it's just going to save certain people too much money. They won't be able to avoid it, and there's going to be a lot of growing pains, I think, for a little while. Hopefully, not too long. This is another reason why I think we should be paying attention to this in education for sure, but also, are we selling our students short by not training them on this? Because it is something that we need to use, or we will be using whether we like it or not. All right, so one thing you do, if we go back to if you think about the Chat GPT prompts, think about what you want to provide clear, concise directions or instructions. Be very clear. I mean, this is like professional writing. You use that to create your prompts, and it puts out something that's should respond appropriately. You want to define the context. So what do I mean by that? So, for example, if I were, think, if I wanted to, I think the example I have is, describe ChatGPT, okay, for a audience of engineers. That would be the context, okay. So otherwise, describe ChatGPT for an audience of third graders, okay. So there would be very different, okay. If anyone used to public speaking knows you have to tailor everything to the audience, right? So providing examples also really helps. This gives something like this gives the tool something to latch onto, okay? This can help model the response, but also give them the expectations. Again, remember these tools are only predicting what they think you need, okay, or are after. Also, with every prompt, tweak it. If it's not exactly the way you want, refine the prompt. Try it again. But experiment. A lot of these tools are still in the baby stages, so experimenting with them is one of the best ways to learn how to use them. So, like at the basic level, writing a prompt would be something like ask a simple question with a complex answer. What is gravity? And it will create a fairly long, extensive. And normally I would be doing this on the side too, but then what's produced is a fairly long answer. So then what we would do is produce it. Summarize this, make it a little bit shorter, maybe a paragraph or a bulleted list, and it'll do that. We might say you're an astronaut in orbit around the Earth. So this is applying the context, and this is where things can get kind of fun. And again, it's a nice reminder that these are really toys in a sense, and playthings. So as we're going through, different context, how does that apply the answer? And what it'll do is it'll respond in a way that reflects the context in some ways. All right, so here's something that for if you're still with me, writing students, here is probably the information you're looking for. How do I cite this? Okay, at the time, I think it was March or April, that we were looking at this. The library, we did some workshops, and at the time there was not a lot of information out there. And this is about the size of it, though. IEEE engineer, or Chicago style as well. IEEE at the time did not recognize, just not doing it, not having it. So if you're familiar with that stuff, you use it. Just don't use ChatGPT. Probably no reason why you would be doing that anyway. MLA, and this is good. Some good standards to stick to. Just do not trust sources. These are their recommendations. At the time I wrote this, not this particular slide, but was looking into this information, they didn't have anything. They didn't have any guidance on how to cite. But their guidance was, do not trust any sources that ChatGPT produces. But whenever you incorporate it into your writing, make sure you cite it. At the time, MLA fell short of actually saying, okay, how do we cite it? Any sort of functional uses. So if you used it to create a bulleted list, you should make a note of that somewhere. Finally, the APA seems to have a bunch more, just tell me how to cite the thing, okay? And they give you an example right here. This was actually thanks to our library folks, they followed up with this and they shared this information. So it's basically OpenAI personal communication, and you would cite it like you would cite an email. All right. Uh, and so I'm assuming that based on that, you would probably do the same thing for MLA. I would avoid IEEE at all if you're using these tools, just because it's more of a technical. It's for engineers, and just not having it. All right, so that's about it. Um, all right, well, that's ChatGPT. That was kind of a long-winded overview with very little demonstration, but anyway, I'll be doing this again tomorrow, practicing the second workshop for our Clerks and Treasurers Institute. But in the meantime, have a good Tuesday, and I will chat more tomorrow. Later.